Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next installment of the VHS DVD reviews. So, this one is going to be a pretty unique one, as I will be focusing on another Dora release. And I know that I've previously covered two very rare ones back when I did my double VHS review video from some time ago, but I was so excited to review this next one that I just couldn't wait. So, for this video, I'm going to be covering one that came from my early years. And we'll see if this one can hold up. So, the release that I'm going to be covering in this video is the unique 2005 release, Big Sister Dora. So, without further delay, let's begin with the release history. Big Sister Dora was first released on VHS and DVD on March 22nd, 2005 by Paramount Home Entertainment. Here's a little fun fact that I learned about this release. The episode Big Sister Dora aired in a day before this VHS was supposed to be released, and the VHS and DVD were released a full day later. And just to give you guys an idea, this is with the comparison, a 1 day difference. It's pretty cool. Also to mention that that my family owned the copy of Big Sister Dora on DVD that only had the English text on it. But back on topic, the DVD was released in Canada on January 18th, 2011, also by Paramount Home Entertainment, which contained the English and French languages on the cover. However, when I found out it was released in Canada, I questioned if it was re-released in Canada or if it was released for the first time. Because I have a feeling it was released in the US and Canada during its first release date, although I might be a little bit mistaken. And after that release date, the DVD disappeared. But despite all of that, and how it just vanished into thin air, it was a pretty unique release to grow up with in my now gone childhood collection. But anyways, that wraps up the short history, so now let's move on to the episodes. So, Big Sister Dora features 2 episodes on the VHS, which are also on the DVD, with the first one being from Season 4 and the other one being from Season 3. And also on the DVD are 2 bonus episodes, with one of them being from Season 3 and the other being from Season 2. And our stories for the release are Big Sister Dora, Dora Saves the Game, Job Day, and A Letter for Swiper. So, let's begin with our first episode, Big Sister Dora. When Dora hears the news that the new baby has been welcomed into her extended family, she and Boots are told to get back to her house to see the new baby. Along the way, they make their way through a spooky forest and through a nut-filled forest, and eventually make it to Dora's house. When they arrive, they join in the rest of Dora's extended family with the party, and Dora becomes a big sister to her new baby brother and baby sister. So, this episode is a very unique one. To start off the release, I think it's a very solid entry. And there's a lot to go about with this episode, so let's get into it. For starters, this episode focuses on the topic of welcoming a new member into the family, and that being a newborn baby. And we can assume that this happened, that the baby was welcomed into the same world that Dora and her friends live in some days ago, and the party is held a few days after Dora's mom and dad have the new baby. I also like that this episode introduces us to a lot more members of Dora's family that we haven't seen before. Obviously, the first time we saw a member of Dora's family outside of our titular character was back in Grandma's house, where we were first introduced to Dora's mom. And later on in the same episode, we're introduced to her grandma, Abuela. Later on in Season 1, we were introduced to Dora's dad during the events of Backpack. And while we don't see a lot of new family members in Dora's extended family, in Season 2, we are introduced to a few more outside of the main family that Dora was with the introduction of Diego during Meet Diego. And more members of the extended family were introduced in the episode that I will be looking at after this one. And with several others, I do admit it's pretty amazing that Dora has a very good extended family, but there's not much to most of them, and they mostly stick with Dora's parents and grandma, as well as Dora and Diego, with Alicia appearing every so often whenever she can. And I'm always under the assumption that less is more, and in this case, I think it really does say something. Now, I'm not saying I hate any of the members of Dora's extended family, but that's just my personal preference. Anyway, the idea of this episode is that Dora is becoming a big sister to a new member of Dora's family, but we as the audience are later revealed that it is not just one baby. So however, I do like how the episode is written, because it sounds like Dora is getting one new family member and is becoming a big sister to her new baby sibling. However, it is late towards the end of the episode, we find out it's twins, with Dora becoming a big sister to her new brother and sister. And this is also emphasized by the cover of the release, because we as the viewers are left to assume who the new family member is, not expecting that it's two of them. This idea is pretty unique, and I actually can commend them for that. But it makes me wonder why they didn't do more like this. However, a big flaw for this episode is the idea that this episode focuses on the joys that come with having a new sibling in the family. I feel like this would have worked better as a two-part story, with this episode being the part one where Dora experiences the joys of becoming a big sister, and part two to this episode focusing on the struggles that come with being a big sister. Because they've never done a two-part story and only stuck to double length episodes, I feel like this was a big missed opportunity for them to do this idea, as it has worked in other shows, including those that I'm a fan of. I also think that the idea that I had thought of works. And also to mention that the episode idea that I thought of was also done in another episode, that being the Gabby's Dollhouse episode, Baby Benny Box is Here, where Baby Box experiences the struggles that come with being a big sister to her new baby brother, Benny. And I'm not really sure what everyone's opinions are on this series, but I actually don't mind this episode because it actually works for a character like Baby Box, and I can understand why she's so doubtful about being a big sister. But in a series like Dora, it just feels incomplete in a sense, and I feel like they could have really done something good by making this the first part of a two-part episode. Maybe that's a weird thing to say, but the evidence speaks for itself. Now, don't think that my thoughts on this episode are going to be that bad, because there are some because I don't hate this episode, and I can appreciate it for what it does. And there are also some unique highlights about the episode, which are the following. Dora explaining that Boots could be a new big monkey brother to her new siblings is pretty unique, even though it's a bit strange. The idea, the writing is pretty smart, and it's a great introduction to Dora's new baby brother and baby sister, whose names are later revealed to be Guillermo and Isabella, even though they land themselves right in the middle as characters, in my opinion. And even though this doesn't affect the episode that much, this is the first episode of Dora the Explorer that features Alicia in any, regardless of if she outside of Go Diego Go. And I really wish she appeared in more episodes, because she is a unique character who could have worked as a good character outside of the spin-off series. But it is what it is. Overall, while many people do consider this to be an okay episode, I consider it to be a near perfect one. While my idea for a two-part story could have worked, this is still a unique story regardless. Overall, Big Sister Dora is a solid episode to begin the release, and while it isn't a top favorite of mine, it is definitely a very good episode for what it is, and I love it. With that said, I give Big Sister Dora a 9 out of 10. Next up, we have our second episode, Dora Saves the Game. A soccer game between the Red Sharks and the Yellow Tigers, with Daisy playing on the Tigers, is about to take place, but is stopped due to the Tigers being one player short against the Sharks. But when Daisy recruits her cousin Dora to compete on the Tigers with her, Daisy tells Dora to get to the soccer stadium as fast as she can. With Boots accompanying her, Dora races off to the soccer stadium while also getting through a jungle and over a bridge. And during the journey, Diego accompanies Dora and Boots. In the end, Dora manages to get to the soccer stadium and to join as an honorary member of the Yellow Tigers, and the game goes on as planned. In the end, not only does Dora save the game, but also solidifies her spot as a player on the Yellow Tigers while also scoring a goal of her own. So, this is probably going to be a very obvious opinion, but I'm just going to be super upfront about it. Not only is this episode the best episode of the release, but it's also the best episode of the season as a whole. I've been looking forward to reviewing this episode for quite some time on this release, and I'm just going to say I watched this so many times that I like everything about it. So for starters, let's go over the plot of the episode. The plot of the episode is that the Red Sharks and the Yellow Tigers are competing against one another, with Daisy competing on the Tigers. The problem is that they are one player short, but why that is, we are never told. And it seems like all hope is lost for the game to go on as planned because Daisy's team has 4 members instead of 5. But as it turns out, Daisy knows that one of her family members who also plays soccer can also compete on the same team as her. And that being Dora, as we've seen in previous episodes where soccer is the main plot of a story, Dora is a pretty great player at that sport. On the topic of Daisy, let's go over her real quick. So this episode is her debut episode, and while we know not much about her, she's a pretty unique character. From what we understand, she's the older sister of Alicia and Diego, and is also another cousin of Dora. And while we do see her in various episodes following this one, it does not feature. This one is the only one where we see her playing soccer and competing on a soccer team. Despite this is a solid introduction episode to Daisy, and I actually like this as the most in terms of her appearances. And this is coming from someone who praised Daisy La Quinceañera very highly back when I reviewed the release that came after this one. And while I still do like Daisy La Quinceañera, I actually like this episode, Dora Saves the Game, a lot more for featuring Daisy in a debut appearance. And although she doesn't play soccer in other episodes following this one, Daisy is a pretty nice character, and I'm very curious as to why she doesn't do this and play the sport after this episode. Because afterwards, she helps out her family at the Animal Rescue Center in the Go Diego Go spinoff, and also makes other sporadic appearances that are few and far between. Another thing about this episode is Dora's soccer kick, which I feel like is just a gimmick for this episode alone, as it wasn't brought up in previous episodes, including the soccer ones. While that is a minor flaw, it doesn't bother me too much because many episodes use gimmicks to make them worth watching. And while many people do question that topic about the episode, there's still a lot to talk about And despite that, I do like how it features I do like how the episode features Dora as the main character, with Daisy being a supporting character. And while I do think Dora and Diego are fine as a duo, I really wish they had Daisy and Dora as a duo more often. And I know that sounds a little bit weird, but hey, I feel like Alicia and Daisy are pretty good compared to Diego. Another thing to mention about this episode is that Diego. He doesn't appear at the beginning of the episode watching the soccer game with Dora's family, and only appears during the journey to the soccer stadium. Why that's the case, I will never know. Another thing to mention about this episode is the jungle. I'm not a big fan of this jungle, and it doesn't even look like one. And the crocodiles, I have no comment on, because they just seem pointless for this episode. And another pointless thing to mention is the bridge. 15 boards give away and the rest stay stable. And why that happened for the plot, I will still never understand. However, I will give the episode this. The interactive segment featuring the otters was pretty cool, and I can appreciate the otters for what they are. And this is one of the best episodes that features appearances from animal friends of Diego. And now we get to the part of the episode that really drives me up a wall. That being Swiper. And I've got quite a bit to say about him. First off, his appearance in this episode is not one of my favorites. And how did he even get into the soccer stadium? Was he just there and was planning to steal the soccer ball while the game was being held up? Or was it something else? My God, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but now I hate him even more for targeting Daisy, as well as Dora, Boots, and Diego. At this point, he's just being an ass just because he can be, and he's also trying to be a jerk for trying to ruin a game that hasn't yet started. And I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but with the latest episodes of this review series that I've covered, I'm starting to hate Swiper even more than I used to. I really hope we get to a release where he's not a nuisance to the series. However, all those flaws don't really ruin the episode, because there's a lot to like about it. So let's go over the highlights. The highlights of the episode are the following. Daisy telling Dora to get to the soccer stadium as fast as she can was pretty amazing. And the fact that she was able to say this on live TV is also astounding. And if Dora's family was watching it, imagine other people who are seeing Daisy talking to her cousin. That It makes me question so much. And I actually really like that. Other highlights of the episode also include the following. The travel song for this episode, Run Dora Run, is pretty amazing because the lyrics are fantastic, and so is the instrumental, because it actually works for an episode like this. There's also the interactive segment where the viewer has to jump over the balls that Tico spilled out of his wagon, and I do think it's pretty cool because the camera moves up and down to make it look like the viewer is jumping. So here's the example. Here's the camera before the viewer has to jump, and then the camera glances up to make it look like the viewer is jumping, and we get a blink and you'll miss it, 4 blink and you'll miss it appearances from Dora, Boots, and Tico before going back down. This is done 4 times, and I think this was pretty smart. There's also the soccer game itself, and I really love how Dora and Daisy compete on the same team together. It really does give me vibes from another sport, from my favorite sport, that being NASCAR, where siblings or other family members compete together in the same sport or the same series. And what makes this even better is that Dora also scores her own goal once the game starts, which I admit was pretty amazing. And the biggest highlight of the episode is this. So, the referee is unaware that Dora is at the soccer game, even though many people in the crowd are easily aware that Dora is there. And what makes this highlight the best part of the episode is this. Daisy tells the viewers to yell at the referee to alert him that Dora is in fact at the soccer stadium. And it's not just the viewer, as well as Diego, Boots, and Daisy who yell at the referee, but it's also the people in the stands. And I'm actually very impressed by that, because from seeing Dora compete in a soccer game to watching Swiper fail at stealing the soccer ball to yelling at a referee, if that doesn't prove that they got their money's worth for that game, I don't know what will. And that's what makes it my number 1 highlight of this episode. Overall, there's not much left to cover about this episode that I have not yet said. It's an amazing episode that is not only the best of the release, but also the season. It's a solid introduction episode to Daisy, who is a pretty amazing character, and it's an amazing episode featuring soccer as the main plot point for this episode. Overall, Dora saves the game, scores its goal of getting a perfect score, which is a 10 out of 10. Up next is Job Day. When Dora and Boots receive a call from Dora's mom, she tells them that she needs help with her archaeologist assignment. So Dora and Boots set off for the pyramid while also learning about what firefighters and architects do when they make their way past the firehouse and across a bridge. They soon arrive at the pyramid to help Dora's mom out, and they manage to find all 6 keys to open the pyramid. Once they get the pyramid door open, they find many treasures inside, with the rarest among them being what was formerly known as the Lost Jewel. And after stopping Swiper from stealing the Lost Jewel, Dora's mom calls it a job well done and vows to take the treasures to museums with Dora and Boots being glad to help her. So, now we have this episode. I will admit, back then I wasn't that big of a fan of this episode, but I've warmed up to it quite a bit. And many people would consider this episode to be a bit of a pointless one, but I actually consider this episode to be very relatable to not just me, but a lot of people. The idea of this episode is job occupations. And this is something that every single person would have to learn about once they get older. And this is coming from someone who experienced this sort of thing in a very unique way. Back many months ago, I took on 4 different places during cooperative education where I learned what there is to learn about 4 different workplaces in the retail world. Those places being Lowe's, Shoppers Drug Mart, Cialo Fresco, and Toys R Us. Each of these places may be different from one another, but they have taught me one thing. Even though it's just these 4 places, there are many jobs out there in the world that many people could do. And even though this episode only presents a select few in this world that people can do, I actually think this episode is very relatable because it features job occupations quite well. This episode is also a very good one because it features Dora's mom. It's always a joy to see a member of Dora's family getting some focus in an episode, and we learn a little bit about her. What we know is that Dora's mom is an archaeologist, who is a person who studies human history and prehistory through the excavation of sites and the analysis of artifacts and other physical remains. However, the episode presents the archaeologist job occupation as someone who looks for lost treasure. However, I had to do some research on the archaeologist occupation for this video, and I honestly think the archaeology position for Dora's mom is a very unique one, and I really wish they built upon this for future episodes because it makes her stand out. The same can be said with the rest of Dora's family if they had different jobs, but that's besides the point. Anyway, the idea of this episode is that Dora's mom needs help to get inside the pyramid that contains the lost jewel. Many people see this as a bit of an odd idea for an episode, but 6 keys are needed to enter the pyramid, so I can at least understand that. However, what I don't understand is the keys. The keys are buried in the ground, but why is that? There's no reason behind it, and I feel like that's pretty pointless. Another thing to mention is that Dora's mom found one of the 6 keys that were needed to open the pyramid. But if that were the case, why was one key buried from the others? Because as we saw in this episode, one key was buried and in one place, and the other 5 were buried in another area. Wouldn't it make more sense to bury the keys in 6 lots of 1? Because I feel like that would make a lot more sense. The only plausible explanation I have for the keys being buried for this episode is that they wanted someone. It was to prevent someone from getting all 6. However, there's something else about the 6 keys that I should mention. Right before the pyramid door had opened once all 6 keys were inserted, Dora's mom. It is shown that Dora's mom is the one that puts all 6 keys into the locks. But how is that possible if she only had 2? And Boots and Dora had had 2 keys each. Did they pass their keys over to Dora's mom? Or did she just take them from them? But despite those flaws, they managed to get inside the pyramid, and I just want to say, between the detail on the inside to all of the treasures, they really did their job properly. And I'm actually very impressed with the details of the pyramid on the inside and the outside, as well as all of the lost treasure. And the lost jewel is an easy favorite because of its importance to the plot of the episode. But then we get to the major part of the episode, that being Swiper. Some people might consider Swiper to be a big negative in this episode, but I think he's just decent here, and it makes sense in a way. Normally, I would insult him for normally I would make a big complaint rant about him, but those are best saved for episodes that are easily examples to how much of a bad character he is. And I actually consider him to be quite fine here, and this is understandable. With how rare the lost jewel is, and how expensive it might be alone, it only makes sense that Swiper would try to steal it. But if he was trying to steal the lost jewel, wouldn't that mean he would have to steal all of the other treasure too? But other than that doesn't bother me in the slightest. And Swiper is just fine here. But in the end, Dora, Boots, and Dora's mom managed to stop Swiper from stealing the jewel, and everything is and all of the treasure in the pyramid is museum bound. Other highlights of the episode that I should mention are the following. The travel song for the episode is fine because it does feature the job occupations of train engineers, clowns, and musicians, and band musicians, with my favorite being the train engineer, or more accurately, the driver and fireman. But I don't really consider this to be one of my favorites. There's also Dora and Boots experiencing the job operations of being a firefighter and an architect. It was nice to see Diego in this episode, and it was nice to see him doing his job of being an animal rescuer, saving baby jaguar. And the best part of the episode is this: Dora and Boots questioning what they can be, with Boots drawing himself as a baseball player and a teacher, while Dora's drawn herself as a soccer player, an astronomer, or a salsa band musician. I think I like, out of the ones that Dora and Boots have done, I think being a soccer player and a baseball player, respectively, are actually my choices for them, because we did see that Dora is good at soccer in this release, and as we saw in We're a Team, and as revealed in many other episodes before and after, Boots is a big baseball fan. So I can at least give them a lot of credit for that alone. Overall, this episode is a very relatable one for people as they get older, because it does feature job occupations very well, and they show them to their best advantage. It was nice to see Dora's mom get some focus in this episode, and it was nice to see her. And while it wasn't a favorite episode of mine back then, I can safely say Job Day gets the job done for being a very relatable story to me in my adult years. Overall, Job Day is amazing. 9 out of 10. And last but not least is the final episode of the release, A Letter for Swiper. When the mail carrier breaks her glasses while doing her mail run, Dora and Boots offer to deliver the mail while she gets her glasses fixed. But they soon find out that among the letters that they have to deliver to their friends, they also have to deliver a letter to Swiper. So during their mail run, they deliver letters to Tico as well as Benny and Isa, and soon they manage to deliver Swiper's letter, and Swiper thanks them for delivering the letter that was assigned to him. So, as a closing episode, I think this one is a pretty unique one. It focuses on Dora and Boots delivering the mail, which I think is a very unique idea that hadn't been done up to this point. And I also like the courteousness from Dora and Boots in offering to do the mail carrier bird's mail run while her glasses get fixed. That sort of nice offer is definitely one that you'd expect out of our two main characters. On the topic of that, there are the letters assigned to Isa, Swiper, Tico, and Benny. So these are the letters that got sent to them, and their contents are the following. Out of all of these, Popcorn seems like the weirdest one to be delivered, and I feel like that's the least realistic that would be delivered in a letter. Delivering stickers is the second weirdest, because even though they can be mailed through through a letter in the mail, it's pretty weird. The second best one are sunflower seeds that can grow super fast, which I feel like is something that should be done, that should be sent in a parcel and not an actual letter. And the best one is easily a card. Regardless if it's a musical card or a regular card, that seems like the most realistic. And plus, every now and then I order stuff online, and most of it most, if not all of it, comes in parcels. So but that's besides the point. And while I do see the idea behind this episode focusing on delivering the mail, the biggest surprise is delivering a letter to Swiper, while also keeping in mind that he's also a sneaky fox at times. But we'll get back to that as we get later on in the review. And another thing to mention about this episode is the destinations. So Dora and Boots have to head to Swiper's home, which is on Blueberry Hill, and along the journey they make their way to Tico's home in a forest, and Benny's home, which is at a barn. And at the barn, Benny and Issa are there. And I know what the episode was going for, because they couldn't fit 4 destinations in a 24-minute episode. But I feel like they could have made it work for this episode alone, but that would depend on the runtime. And I feel like they could have fit Issa's garden in the lineup somewhere, and that would have made a lot more sense. Another thing to mention is that I'm not a really big fan of the mail carrier, the chickens that chase Dora and Boots. It is mentioned in the episode that they chase mail carriers, but that doesn't make any sense, since chickens aren't that hostile. And this would also lead into a mini-game segment where Dora and Boots have to get away from the chickens that chase them up until the end of the mini-game. And with how fast those chickens run, they are pretty scary if I'm being honest, and I wouldn't want them to exist in the real world. And with how fast they run, looks like it's time to invest in some chicken riding zombies. And I know that sounds very cheesy, but I couldn't resist. What also strikes me as odd is that Dora and Boots have to make it through a blizzard in order to get to the barn. But while I do think it's okay for the most part, it doesn't really make a lot of sense in my opinion. And then we get to the main part of the episode that I've been wanting to mention. Not much happens in this episode, and I don't really think highly of this episode, and consider it to be and I consider this to be not a good episode, but a pretty average one. I'd even go so far to say that this is actually as decent as as a previous episode that I reviewed, that being Click. And while both episodes are pretty decent and land right next to one another, I actually like Click a little bit more because there's at least some purpose behind it, and Dora and Boots are going on there's actually a reason for Dora and Boots going on an adventure. But when it comes to A Letter for Swiper, it doesn't really work the same way. I just don't know how to explain it, but it just feels like a bit of a run-of-the-mill style story, which is not a bad thing, but it's something I want to point out. And the last thing I need to mention is easily Swiper. After a few episodes of me criticizing him, you'd think that he'd be a negative here. But I actually consider him to be a very good positive here, because he's not stealing from anyone, and Dora and Boots are giving a letter to him that was from his grandma. And I actually kind of like that. What makes this even better is that he thanks Dora and Boots for delivering the letter for him. And I actually really like that. Swiper may not be a favorite character to me, because he does have his episodes where he's a very bad person, but he does have his hidden gems, and I can respect that. And I really do hope we get to see more hidden gem episodes in the near future. Maybe that's a weird thing to say, but the evidence does speak for itself. Overall, there's not much left to cover about this episode that I have not yet talked about. It's a very unique way to end off the release, and while many people might not be, and while I wouldn't call this a fantastic episode, I'm not saying it's a bad one. And it's a very unique way to feature Swiper in an episode, but also not make him the bad guy. And really thinking about it, because I will be looking back on this episode when I eventually cover the DVDs Cowgirl, Dora, and Musical School Days, I should really do a video where I focus on Swiper's worst episodes as well as his hidden gems, because I cannot believe that how good of an episode this is featuring him. And you know what? With enough luck, this episode might end up making the list of hidden gems. Overall, A Letter for Swiper is a decent way to end off the release, and it gets a 7.5 out of 10. So what are my final thoughts on Big Sister Dora? If it isn't already clear, this is a very unique release. It was one release that I would watch a lot back during my early years, and now that I'm older, I look at a few of them with a new set of eyes, and they're all pretty good. It goes without saying that there's one episode which is awesome, one episode that I can relate to, another very good one, and a very middle of the road episode, give or take how you might feel. The release contains a very good mix of episodes that are very good watch most of the time, and I actually consider them to be a good selection for this release. They may not work, and I'd say that this is the perfect release featuring episodes like this. Now, it may not be perfect, and the episodes here may be flawed, but that's okay, because that's what makes it the release it is. For those of you who are looking for a pretty good Dora release, this is definitely one that I'd recommend. But if you are going to get it, go for the DVD, because 4 episodes will work out a lot better than 2. And that's going to do it for this review. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more VHS and DVD reviews and other home media related content. And be sure to check out my other VHS and DVD reviews that are in the playlist down below in the description. So, what release am I going to cover next time? Well, since I've reviewed plenty of Dora releases up to this point, I think it's time we put some focus towards some other shows. And on that note, which one am I going to look at next time? Well, I'm kind of in the mood for a Little Einsteins release, and this one is the first one to feature 23-minute episodes from season 2. So next time, we're going to see what adventures await us when we race for space. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next VHS DVD review video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.